In this video, we're going to be looking at a new feature in GLSU 6.0 called the import feature. The import feature can be found on the ribbon bar right here. This is going to take you to the mapping feature that's going to allow you to load delimited files directly into your GLSU template. Now we're going to walk through a scenario that's going to show you how to load line item data directly into the GLSU template that is complete in itself with an offsetting row and will actually post directly after the import. This delimited data can come from several sources. A few that I can think of are SAP extracts, mainframe extracts. They may come from one of your vendors directly, or you may have created the data in Excel and saved it as a CSV or tab delimited file. Let's take a look at the actual data. The data itself is, I have it loaded here in Excel, but it's just a CSV file. The CSV file contains a posting key and net amounts, an item text, and all the bits of information that we're going to need to map onto the line item so that we can fill our GLSU line items out, and we will validate it and show you that it will actually post. So going back to the Excel spreadsheet, I already have a general ledger template set up. I have already manually entered the header information. Clicking on the import button is going to take you to this screen, which is going to allow you to load a common delimited file or some other delimited file. In the case of this demo, we're going to load the comma separated file that we showed on the screen earlier. Notice that this is going to load 10 lines of the preview area. We can change that preview amount here to 5, 100, whatever you need to use as a preview amount of data for your benefit. Notice that line 1 has header information in it. We don't actually want to load that data, we want to use it as headers. So when we get to the mapping process, it's going to allow you to see the data next to an actual field name, and that's going to help you to map more accurately. So let's go to the map process. Click on the Map Fields button. This brings you to the mapping process. The mapping process is going to allow you to take information coming in from the comma delimited file and map it to your GLSU line items. Now note that the line items are actually represented here as they are in the GLSU full template. We have already pre-entered the document type, company code, and all the other header information. So we're going to do our mapping process, load all of the line item information, and then validate and post. Now note that each line of the inbound data file is a single line of the entry, so we will only be using the primary part of the map. The offset section of the map is used when each line of the inbound file also has the offset line item information, but we don't need that for this particular example. Also note that your inbound files are likely to be much larger, and the GLSU split document process still works when you use the mapping function with files of more than 1,000. Our example has perhaps 10 or 12 lines. So let's take a look at the mapping process. Mapping process consists of finding the data in the incoming file and mapping it to a GLSU line item field. Now this preview area, it's turned on its side. It's the same data that you saw on the previous screen, and you can next and previous through this data so that you can understand it better, and hopefully that'll help you map your data accurately. The first thing we need is a posting key. The posting key is down here coming in from the CSV file. We're going to click and drag that information over to the posting key, and then we're going to look for an account next. There's a GL account coming in. You can see how the header helps you to determine which column is the general ledger account versus something else. We're going to find an amount, click and drag, and line item text, click and drag, and finally the cost center, click and drag. At this point we have completed our mapping. We can save and exit, come back in. We can delete particular line items. We can clear out the primary map and start over again if we wish. But for this example, we're going to save and import. You have several options here on the import data screen. You may clear all of the line items in your GLSU template and load the CSV file or delimited file into your line items, or you can do so but append the data without actually deleting any data from your line items. You can import all of the records, which we're going to do because we're loading a balanced file. But for other types of files, we can load just a subset of records, which you may want to do on very large files just to see if you've got the mapping correct. Ready to import, click. It imports the data. You'll notice that that was done very quickly. Again, you can load thousands of records, and the GLSU split document process is still going to work for you. At this point we have our header information, we have our line information. Notice that it's completely balanced because we have all of the line information with the file providing even the offset line item. Now we can go to validate. Going to log in. The validation occurs, and we should notice that we have no errors found. So if you have a nice clean file where the accounts and the cost centers and all of the data actually exists in your SAP system, hopefully this is what you see, and you'll be able to automate your loads and not have to manually edit the data before posting, which is what we're going to do now. I'm going to post this data. This is a very quick process that is then going to ask me for an attachment, which we're not going to attach the document. We're just going to go ahead and show you that we did in fact post the data directly after loading it from a file, not touching the data whatsoever, and we have the final document. And there you have a simple scenario as an example for the new GLSU 6.0 import data feature. Welcome to scenario 2. We're going to continue looking at the import feature of GLSU, and in this particular example we're going to be looking at a different type of CSV file. The CSV file that we're looking at has one record per complete transaction, which means that there's enough information to create both the primary and offsetting transactions on one row. Now let's go into the import feature itself and take a look at that CSV file. My data has headers. That's already been picked for me, and I'm going to go into map fields. Let's take a look at that data. You can immediately notice that I've got more than one posting key. I've got a debit and a credit posting key, and I've got a general ledger account and an offset account. I've got a net amount. So with that information I should be able to create two records in my GLSU template that will be individually balanced. The result will be that the whole file is balanced. So let's actually do that exercise. First thing I want to do is turn on my offset map, and then we are going to fill in the primary map based on the data that we have. I'm still going to just click and drag and drop each one of these fields. We do the posting key first. The account is the general ledger account. The amount is the net amount. The text would be line item text, and the cost center would be the cost center. And that gets us one half of the transaction, one half of the line item entry. But we need the second half to balance that out. So using an offset map, we're going to fill out the second row now. Using the posting key 50 and account number offset account, and the amount, we'll use net amount, and I don't really have any text or cost center for an offsetting entry, so we're actually done as far as mapping is concerned. We can go ahead and save and import the data. I'm going to clear any line items that I might have. I'm starting blank, so that doesn't really matter. I am going to import all of the records. Let's import and exit, and let's take a look at this file that we've loaded. Notice that the primary map gave us posting key 40 along with its information, and the offset map gave us a second row, an offsetting row, with primary or posting key of 50 and account number of 100,000. At this point I should be able to validate the GLSU template. I click on validate. It's going to make me log into my SAP system. And the validation occurs. Went through that process rather quickly. Of course, I don't have a lot of data in this example. Please note that you can load as much data as you could previously when you were hand entering it, and even if you have 2,000 rows, the document split feature of GLSU is still going to occur. So in this particular case we're not concerned about that, but I want to make sure that you know that that is still available to you. The validation went fine. Let's just hit post. We're posting the document. I'm not going to attach it in this example. Notice that we have our document number. So everything was posted fine. It came from a single file, each row representing literally 2 rows, a primary row and an offset row. And we just posted it and everything went fine. So that is another example of how you might use the import feature of GLSU 6.0. In scenario 3, we're going to be taking a look at how you might be able to load your incoming vendor file data by mapping it from a CSV file directly into your GLSU template. Now on the screen right now I'm showing you the end result of what I've done, and start from beginning and show you how to build that from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is initialize my form in the standard way, and we accept that. Now we know that with the import feature we have to fill in the header manually because the import feature only loads line item data. Having said that, it can load line item data into dropped headers as well, thereby allowing you to create multiple documents in one GLSU template. Just like we saw in the original screen, that's what we're going to show you as an example. The first thing I need to do is fill in the header. And today's date. Currency. And this is scenario 3 demo. In order to load this data, we're going to have to move this document number down into the line items, and we'll also need a reference number so that we can actually post one document per reference number. I've chosen reference number to hold the vendor's invoice number, as you saw in the original finished example. We're going to recreate that example, and we need to do that by going into Choose Fields, finding the document number and dragging it down. So now it is part of our detail fields or our line item level fields. And we need to move this ex-Bellner, this reference field, over to the header before we can drop the header. I'm going to drop the header and I'm going to put it as the very first record. I'm going to accept the changes, and you'll notice that we're starting to look now like the original example. I don't need Profit Center, so I'm going to choose Fields. I'm going to go to Profit Center and get rid of that, and I'm going to hit Accept. Now we're very close to the point where we could actually start importing data into this GLSU template. Once again, we're going to go for the import feature. Click on that. I have already selected a file, this SAP extract 0301. This could just as easily be vendor incoming file 0804. It's whatever file you have, go ahead and find that But for this example, I've already pre-selected a file so that we can just kind of go through this quickly. We've got some more things to learn in scenario 4, so I want to keep this section short. I do have headers in my file. I'm going to go to map fields, and just for the sake of showing you exactly how to do this, I'm going to clear the primary map. I'm going to clear the offset map, and then I'm going to save and exit. If I go back to the import feature, if I go back to map fields, you'll notice that it is now blank. Not only the primary map, but the offset map. And we will be using the offset map in this example. Notice the coloration. I have my reference field, posting key, account, amount, and the colors are the same so that you can tie in your mind exactly what you're mapping to and how it's going to actually show up in the GLSU template. First thing we need to do is map a reference field. Given that this is incoming vendor data, I'm looking for an invoice number. Let's click, drag and drop that. The posting key will be 31. The account will be the actual vendor number itself. The amount will be the net amount. The text, we can use this text for that particular line, and the cost center. We do not fill in anything for the document number because of course that's going to be generated after the posting step in our GLSU template. I do need to fill in the offset map now. First thing I'm going to do, notice that the dropped header information only applies to the primary map. It does not apply to the offset map. The offset map does not need the dropped headers in order to become part of the document that's going to be posted. The posting key will be 40. Drag and drop that into place. The account number is going to be our offset account number. Now, in this particular case, I've got it coming in on the file. Later on in scenario 4, I'm going to show you a different way to do this. The amount is the net amount. The text, we're going to use this item text. And the cost center has already been allocated and mapped to the primary map, so I think we are ready to go. I'm going to save and import. I don't have any data, but technically I'm going to clear my line items, then import the data. I do want all the records, and I'm going to import and exit. So this is starting to look like our original. I'll just kind of open some things up, close some things down, and just kind of clean it up in general. I have my reference came through, my posting keys came through, my vendor number, my offset account, my amounts. One of them is a credit. You can check that by looking at F4 and typing in 31. That is your credit. So 40 would be your debit for your offset. At this point, because I've got dropped headers and I have a reference field that's changing, you can see these invoice numbers go from 869 to 875, etc. Each pair of lines is going to produce one document. I'm going to validate this document. Make sure I've allocated everything properly. And in this case, I actually have not. The field cost center is suppressed for posting key 31. So did I put it on the wrong line? In fact, I did. Easily fixed. Let's go over to import. We need to get rid of the cost center here by clicking on clear a single link and find the cost center, drag and drop it to our offset map, and save and exit. Now here's where the clear my line items and import the data comes in. I don't have to clear anything out before I can re-import the data, so I will just re-import the data. And notice that the cost center is now moved down to the offset row. Now let's try again to validate. No errors found. So let's post the document. Now it's going through each pair, stopping, posting a document to SAP, going to the next pair, etc. So we should expect to see many documents, one per pair. You can see that we posted many documents. First pair, second pair, third pair, etc. all the way down. And that's how you might use GLSU to load incoming vendor data. We believe that that will be very valuable for you. In the next scenario, I'm going to show you how to use reference rows to make this GLSU template and the import feature even more powerful. In scenario 4, we'd like to show you a powerful feature of the import functionality. That is the ability to fill in data where there is no data coming in from an outside file. You can translate data, you can hard code data, you can calculate data. Let's take a look at the incoming file. Now notice that in previous examples we actually had actual posting keys. In this example we have CR for credits, DR for debits. We also don't have an offset account coming in to map to our GLSU template. But we can handle all that with ref1 and ref2 rows. Going back to our original completed example, we are going to now deconstruct it and rebuild it from scratch. That means clearing out the ref1 and ref2 rows, as well as all of the data. At this point we're going to go into the import feature and actually build this GLSU template from scratch and load the data in using our reference 1 and reference 2 directives to help us fill in the missing gaps. I've already got my 0501 CSV file loaded up. As you can see, again, there's the credit and the debit, and there is no offset account. There is a GL account, but we're not using that as our offset account. We can map the fields, and right now nothing is mapped, but we are going to use both the primary and the offset map in this example. First thing we need to map is the invoice number. and the posting key. Now you might think it goes here, but we're going to derive that using the reference 1 directive. We're going to actually put it in our blank column because it needs to be calculated. Same thing with the debit posting key. That's going to go in the offset row down in the blank column. The next thing we need to look at is the account number. And then for a vendor file, that is the vendor number. We have a net amount. We have a text. We will leave cost center blank in the primary map. The document number will be calculated, and that completes the primary map. So let's finish the offset map. Posting key will be calculated by the ref2 directive, so we're going to leave that alone, and we're going to go find an account number. Well, again, we don't have one, so we're going to hard code that using the ref2 directive, and we'll get into building the ref1 and ref2 directives in just a little bit. Let's fill in what we can though. Let's go to net amount. I happen to know that this account number that we're going to use doesn't like having text, so I'm going to leave that blank, but it does want a cost center. And if I want to save and import that, we can see at least what data we get so far. Let's see if everything's mapped properly. We have a reference number, an account, amount, a text, and there's our CRDR sitting over there in the blank column waiting to be converted. One of the easiest ways to understand the ref1 and ref2 directives is to load the data like this and then use the first two rows as reference rows. These first two rows were loaded from the file, just like all the rest, and you can visualize the missing data. We know that posting key needs to be derived from the CRDR column, and the account number needs to be hard-coded. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter a VLOOKUP command to convert the CR to an actual value, which will have to be 31. I'm going to copy this down. And you'll notice that the debit code converted properly to a 40. If we had no data in there, it would convert to an NA, which is a good way to see where your formulas are in your ref1 and ref2 rows. So for the moment I'm going to put those back, CR, DR, and let's work on the account number. The offsetting account number is going to be found by pressing the F4 key, and I happen to know that the account number that we're after is in the 476 range, so let's use 476 asterisk. We'll use our search feature to find those, and I'm going to use office supplies. So now we know that we are calculating the posting keys, we are hard coding the account number, and we can now get rid of all of the other data that was loaded so that we can proceed to complete our ref1 and ref2 rows. At this point now we can import the data. The reference 1 and the reference 2 rows will fill in the missing data, and let's see what we get. Now notice that nothing happens to the ref1 and ref2 rows because they're like skip rows or comment rows. They're directives to GLSU to tell the features how to perform their duties. So no data was loaded in those rows, but you can see the data that was mapped getting loaded here. This is mapped. The amount was mapped, but the posting key was derived using a VLOOKUP against the CRDR blank column, as well as the 40 posting key. That was also derived. What about our offset account? That was hard-coded right here, and as you can see, it gets copied as the offset account for every single pair of general ledger entries in our import. Now let's see what happens when we validate. No errors found. If we get our mapping right and we get our reference rows right, you'll find that you can load data directly from a single file into GLSU using the new import feature. If everything's correct, you're going to be able to validate and have no problems whatsoever, which means that you can go directly to the posting step and let GLSU post all of the documents for you. I'm not going to attach the documents because I just want to see that they were in fact actually created, and here they are. So that's a very powerful feature of GLSU 6.0. It allows you to take that file, load it right into your GLSU template. If you've got everything mapped right, you can validate, post, and be done. One final trick that I'd like to show you with the import feature is that you can format the reference 1 row or reference 2 row however you like. In this case, I'm going to format it as a green bar row. Go to Import, Map Fields, and Import. Isn't that cool? Now you can see that your credit rows and your debit rows are highlighted to make them easily readable. So as you can see, the addition of the ref1 and ref2 directives makes the import feature all that more powerful. A CSV formatted file that may beep hello. No. Waiting. We're going to start over now and do the validation part. Per record, per ding, the import feature only loads data crap. The import data only loads I'm sorry, that is a header. And that's how you might use your data. And that's how you might use GLSU to load incoming vendor data. If I is equal to CR, okay, the posting key, duh, it's blank. Now that I've got my formula correct, following the gamification trend, future version GLSU Raspberry will allow you to work more better within a simulated competitive teamworky environment. Thank you for listening.